Hello there. So behind me is a drawing of the execution of a woman called Catherine Hayes in 1726. Catherine Hayes was burnt alive at the stake for charges of petty treason because she had conspired to kill her husband. So I'm going to move out the way so you can actually see this drawing in all its horrifying glory. So this charge and this punishment of burning women alive at the stake for killing their husbands, this was in effect in law from 1351 up until 1793. After that, there was still the crime of petty treason, and women were still put to death for killing their husbands on this charge up until 1825 and they were hanged for that. So at least the burning was taken away in the late 1790s. The reason why this was such a severe punishment was because women were, they were expected to belong, they were their husband's property, and therefore if they committed a crime, if they tried to murder their husbands, it was similar to a servant murdering their master. It was seen as a threat to not only the husband, of course, but also to the natural order of things, the way society was organised, and so therefore a threat to the state. What would normally happen is the women would be tied to the stake, and then the executioner would try to strangle them first with the chains that were wrapped around them so that they wouldn't have to suffer the full agony of the actual burning itself. So just to explain what happened in this particular case, Catherine Hayes, she was quite happily married to her husband, John. She was, by all accounts, a bit of a promiscuous woman, originally from Birmingham. Her and her husband moved down to London. She'd already had an illegitimate son from a previous liaison. And by the time of the death of John Hayes, her husband, her son was in his 20s. It's a bit of a bizarre one, this one. So Catherine was apparently very demanding of her husband, particularly sexually. She was apparently very sexually voracious, and he couldn't satisfy her. So she convinced him that they needed to take in a lodger. Now, the lodger apparently was her illegitimate son, but her husband John didn't know this. And Catherine then reportedly started an adulterous affair with her own son, which I find quite hard to believe. But there we go. That was what was in the Old Bailey reports. And so she was carrying on with her son, and then she started carrying on with the next lodger that was moved in as well. Now, she somehow organised with these two men, her son and the other lodger, to murder her husband. They got him really drunk one night, and then they beat him to death, and then they dismembered his body, dumping his head into the river. Now, unfortunately, his head was fished out. And of course, they didn't have DNA or forensics in those days. So in order to get an identification, they actually stuck the head on a pike and put it in the churchyard of a local church. And that way people passing would recognise him. And they did. They recognised that it was John Hayes. And so Catherine was promptly arrested. And obviously it became clear she confessed that she had, she didn't confess to killing him, but she confessed to helping the two lodgers dispose of his body. So for that, she was convicted to petty treason, to burning alive, and her two accomplices were sentenced to hang. She actually witnessed the two lodgers being hanged before she was executed, and that must have been quite hard because one of them, of course, was her own son, reportedly. But then her own death was pretty horrendous. She, she was tied to the stake in order to be burnt alive, and she said to the executioner, will you strangle me? Will you, put me out of my misery before I'm burnt alive? And apparently he tried to do this, but then the flames, the faggots had already been lit, they started to burn his hands. So he sort of leaped back, and she was then engulfed in flames, according to onlookers, and also according to this drawing here. You can see she's got her hands out, and that was because she reportedly was trying to bat away the flames. So apparently one of the executioners in attendance grabbed a piece of wood and threw it at her head to burst open her skull so that she would be put out of her misery. Pretty horrific all rounds, though. Catherine Hayes. Now, we talk about other women who met similarly undignified ends, if you like, for various crimes on our upcoming tour. The Jailbirds of Old London. So that will soon be on sale. Tickets will be on sale for that if you want to learn all about the female criminals of London in the 1800s and the early 1900s and learn about what their fate was, what they did and why. Stay tuned for that.